I used to think small acts of theft were just sisterly things. The belt was nothing special to anyone else. Black leather, silver buckle worn smooth from years of use. A tiny scratch near the third hole where I had caught it on a door handle in high school. But it was mine. The only thing in my closet that felt like it belonged to me and not to the version of myself everyone expected me to be. I was standing in front of my closet that morning, already running late for the gallery opening I'd been dreading for weeks. My hands moved through hangers automatically, pulling out the same safe choices I always made: muted colours, loose fits, nothing that would draw attention or invite comment. The belt should have been hanging on its usual hook inside the door. It wasn't there. I checked twice, then 3 times, my fingers trailing over empty space where the leather should have been. My chest tightened with that familiar feeling, the small, suffocating awareness that something of mine had disappeared into the void of my sister's room, swallowed up by her endless need for more. "Livy!" My mother's voice cut through the house, sharp with impatience. "Emma's waiting in the car. We can't be late." I closed my eyes. Of course, Emma was already ready. Of course she was in the car, probably checking her reflection in the visor mirror, perfectly composed while I was still standing here in my underwear, searching for something that was already gone. I grabbed a dress instead, navy blue, shapeless, forgettable, and pulled it over my head. No belt, no definition, just fabric hanging off my shoulders like an admission of defeat. The car ride was exactly what I expected. Emma sat in the front seat beside our mother, her outfit catching the sunlight through the window, a white silk blouse tucked into high-waisted black pants, cinched at the waist with my belt. She'd styled it differently than I ever had, threading a thin gold chain through one of the belt loops so it hung at her hip like an accessory from a magazine shoot. "Doesn't Emma look stunning?" my mother said, glancing at her in the rearview mirror with undisguised pride. "That belt really pulls the whole look together." I sat in the back seat, watching my sister adjust the buckle slightly, her fingers confident and casual. She knew I could see it. She knew exactly what she'd done. "Thanks, Mum," Emma said, her voice light and warm. "I found it in Olivia's closet this morning. She never wears it anyway." My mother laughed, that easy, indulgent sound she reserved only for Emma. "That's so sweet of you to let her borrow it, Livy. You two are so good about sharing." I didn't correct her. What was the point? I tried before countless times, and the response was always the same. Emma needed it more. Emma had better taste. Emma knew how to make things look good. And wasn't it selfish of me to hoard clothes I barely wore when my sister could transform them into something beautiful? The gallery opening was in the Arts District downtown, a converted warehouse with exposed brick and track lighting that made everything feel both industrial and precious. My father was already inside, standing near the entrance with his hands in his pockets, scanning the room with the distracted air of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "There's my girls," he said when he spotted us, but his eyes went straight to Emma. They always did. "You look wonderful, sweetheart. Very sophisticated." Emma beamed and did a small turn, the belt catching the light. "Thanks, Dad. Do you think it works with the outfit?" "Absolutely," he said, already steering her toward a cluster of his colleagues near the bar. "Come meet some people from the firm. They'll love you." I stood beside my mother, watching them disappear into the crowd. She was on her phone, texting someone, her attention already elsewhere. "Mom," I said quietly, "that belt Emma's wearing—" "Not now, Olivia," she interrupted without looking up. "We talked about this. You need to be more generous with your sister. She has important events coming up, and you know how hard she works on her appearance." I swallowed the rest of the sentence. My throat felt tight, like I'd tried to breathe underwater. The evening blurred after that. I stood in corners, held drinks I didn't want, smiled at people who looked past me to see if someone more interesting was standing nearby. Emma glowed in the centre of every conversation, her laughter bright and effortless, my belt emphasizing her waist in a way that made her look put together and intentional, while I felt like a smudge someone had forgotten to erase. At one point, I saw him across the room. Daniel, my boyfriend of 3 years, the man I'd brought to every family dinner and holiday gathering, the person I'd believed saw me differently than everyone else did. He was talking to Emma. I watched them from behind a concrete pillar, my fingers wrapped around a glass of wine I couldn't remember picking up. They were standing close, not inappropriately so, but close enough that I could see the way his posture had changed. He was leaning toward her slightly, his face animated in a way it never was when he talked to me anymore. And Emma was laughing, touching the belt buckle absently as she spoke, drawing his eyes down to her waist. Something cold settled in my stomach. Not jealousy exactly, but recognition. The same pattern repeating itself in a new context. The same story I'd been living my entire life, now playing out with the person I'd trusted most. I turned away and walked to the bathroom, locking myself in a stall until my breathing evened out. When I emerged, I reapplied lipstick I didn't need and told myself I was being paranoid. Daniel loved me. He'd said so. He'd chosen me, but when I found him again an hour later, he was still with Emma. And when I approached, his smile felt strained, like I'd interrupted something private. "Hey," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "Ready to go?" "Actually," Daniel said, glancing at Emma, then back at me, "I was thinking I might stay a bit longer. Emma was just telling me about this exhibition she's curating next month. It sounds really interesting." Emma gave me an apologetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sorry, Livy, I didn't mean to monopolise him. You don't mind, do you?" I minded. I minded so much that my teeth ached from holding the words back. But I smiled instead, shrugged, and said it was fine. It wasn't fine. I took a rideshare home alone, watching the city lights blur past the window. My phone buzzed twice, messages from Daniel saying he'd call me later, that he hoped I wasn't upset. I didn't respond. What would I even say? The house was empty when I arrived. My parents and Emma were still at the gallery, probably having dinner somewhere expensive afterward, the kind of place they took Emma to celebrate her accomplishments, but never thought to bring me. I went to my room and stood in front of the closet again, looking at the empty hook where my belt should have been. It seemed like such a small thing to mourn. Just a piece of leather, just an accessory. But it felt like more than that. It felt like proof of something I'd known my whole life but never had the language to articulate. That nothing I owned was really mine. Not my clothes, not my space, not even my relationships. I lay down on my bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. The exhaustion was bone deep, the kind that sleep couldn't fix. I'd been tired for years, I realised. Tired of being second choice. Tired of watching Emma take pieces of my life and wear them better than I ever could. Tired of loving people who only saw me as the warm-up act for someone more deserving of their attention. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Daniel. I didn't look at it. The weeks that followed confirmed what I already knew. Daniel started spending more time with Emma, always under the pretense of legitimate reasons. Museum visits and networking events and coffee meetings about art world connections. My parents encouraged it, pleased that their daughter's social circles were overlapping, that Daniel was getting along so well with the whole family. No one asked how I felt about it. The belt never came back to my closet. Emma wore it constantly, pairing it with different outfits, each combination more effortless and perfect than the last. And every time I saw it around her waist, I felt a small part of myself disappear. I stopped eating properly. Not intentionally at first, but food lost its appeal when my stomach was constantly churning with anxiety. My mother noticed I was losing weight and praised it, said I looked better, that maybe I was finally taking appearance seriously. Emma suggested we go shopping together, said she could help me find my style now that I was slimming down. I declined. The thought of standing in a dressing room while Emma picked out clothes for me, transforming me into some acceptable version of myself, made my skin crawl. Daniel broke up with me on a Tuesday. We were sitting in his apartment, the place I'd helped him decorate, where I'd spent countless nights believing I belonged, and he told me he couldn't do it anymore. He said I'd become distant, that I wasn't the person he'd fallen in love with, that something had changed between us. He didn't mention Emma. He didn't have to. I nodded, collected my few belongings from his bathroom, and left without crying. The tears came later in my car, in the parking lot of a grocery store I'd pulled into because I couldn't see the road anymore. When I told my parents, my mother sighed and said it was probably for the best. My father barely looked up from his newspaper. Emma hugged me and said she was sorry, that Daniel was an idiot for letting me go, that I deserved better. 2 weeks later, I saw them together at a coffee shop near campus, Daniel and Emma. His hand was on the small of her back, guiding her through the door. She was wearing my belt. I didn't confront them. I didn't cause a scene. I went home, climbed the stairs to my room, and realised I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt anything other than numb. The numbness became my constant companion. I moved through days like a ghost, attending classes I didn't care about, sitting through family dinners where conversation flowed around me without ever including me, existing in spaces without occupying them. My mother suggested therapy, not because she was concerned about my well-being, but because my mood was affecting Emma, making her feel guilty when she hadn't done anything wrong. I almost laughed at that. Almost. Instead, I started driving late at night, taking long routes to nowhere, just to feel like I was moving, even when everything inside me had stopped. It was on one of those drives, on a rain-slicked road with no streetlights, that I saw the truck too late. The impact was startlingly quiet. I expected noise, metal screaming, glass shattering, the dramatic crescendo of disaster. But there was just a dull crunch, then the slow, almost peaceful sensation of spinning, and finally, stillness. I remember thinking how strange it was that this was how it ended, not with some grand revelation or final triumph, but with a wet road and bad timing, and the understated violence of physics. The pain came in waves, but it felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. I could see my hands on the steering wheel, blood running down my wrists, but I couldn't feel them. Couldn't feel anything except a deep, spreading cold. I thought about Emma wearing my belt, about Daniel's hand on her back, about my parents who would cry at my funeral but wouldn't understand what they lost because they'd never really seen me in the first place. And then I thought about nothing at all. The cold became absolute, the darkness complete, and somewhere in that void, I let go. I woke up to sunlight streaming through familiar curtains. My first thought was that I'd survived. My second thought was that something was wrong. The room around me wasn't a hospital. It was my childhood bedroom, but younger somehow. The posters on the wall were ones I'd taken down years ago. The desk in the corner held textbooks from high school. I sat up slowly, my hands moving to my chest, my arms checking for injuries that weren't there. No pain, no blood, just smooth, unbroken skin and the disorienting sensation of being in the wrong time. My phone was on the nightstand, an older model, one I'd replaced 2 years ago. The date on the screen read September 14th, 2019. I was 17 again. The knowledge settled over me like cold water, shocking and clarifying. This wasn't heaven or hell or some dying dream. This was real. I was back, standing at the beginning of the same story with full memory of how it ended. I spent the first hour sitting on my bed processing. Every detail of my previous life was intact. The years of being overlooked, the slow erosion of self-worth, the final betrayals that had led me to that dark road. But now I was here, given a chance I didn't ask for but wouldn't waste. The door opened without warning. Emma breezed in, 15 years old and already beautiful in that effortless way that would define her future. "Livy, have you seen my—" She stopped, her eyes landing on the belt hanging from my closet door. "Oh, there it is. Can I borrow that? I have a date tonight and it would be perfect with my outfit." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the pattern beginning. The expectation in her eyes that I would say yes. The casual assumption that what was mine was also hers. The foundation of a dynamic that would define the next 6 years of my life. "No," I said. Emma blinked, confusion crossing her face. "What?" "No, you can't borrow it. I'm using it." "But you never wear it," Emma protested, moving toward the closet. "Come on, don't be difficult. I'll give it back tomorrow." "I said no." My voice was calm, steady. I felt no anger, just absolute clarity. Emma's confusion shifted to irritation. "I'm going to tell Mom you're being selfish." "Go ahead." She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and left, her footsteps heavy on the stairs. I heard her voice carrying up from the kitchen, the familiar whine she used when she wanted our parents to intervene. But I didn't move. I stayed on my bed, my hands folded in my lap, waiting. My mother appeared in my doorway 10 minutes later, her expression already set in disappointed lines. "Olivia, Emma says you won't let her borrow your belt. What's this about?" "It's my belt," I said simply. "I don't want to lend it out." "But she needs it for tonight. You're not even using it." "That doesn't matter. It's mine." My mother's frown deepened. "This isn't like you. When did you become so selfish?" The question hung in the air. In my previous life, I would have crumbled under it, apologized, retrieved the belt, and handed it over with a forced smile. But now, with the weight of 6 years of consequences behind me, I saw it differently. This wasn't about selfishness. This was about boundaries. "I've always been like this," I said quietly. "You just never noticed." My mother opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. She left without another word, but I could hear the disappointment in the careful way she closed my door. I got up and locked it. The next weeks were an exercise in quiet revolution. I made small changes, careful adjustments that diverged from the path I'd walked before. When Emma asked to borrow clothes, I said no. When my parents suggested I sign up for activities Emma enjoyed, I chose different ones. When I felt the old impulse to fade into the background, I stayed present instead. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't confront anyone or make speeches about fairness. I simply stopped participating in my own erasure. The family noticed. My mother commented on my new attitude with thinly veiled criticism. My father seemed baffled by my refusal to simply go along with things. Emma started avoiding me, confused and hurt by boundaries she'd never encountered before. But I held firm. Every small act of self-preservation was a brick in a wall I was building between the person I'd been and the person I refused to become again. I changed my style completely. The muted colours and shapeless clothes stayed in my closet untouched. Instead, I started wearing things that made me feel present in my own skin. Structured jackets, bold colours, clothes that required confidence to pull off. I cut my hair short, started wearing makeup differently, transformed my appearance into something that couldn't be borrowed or replicated. Emma hated it. She made comments about me trying too hard, about looking unnatural, about changing for attention. But I saw the uncertainty in her eyes when she looked at me now. I was becoming someone she couldn't absorb or eclipse, and it unsettled her. When I met Daniel again, at the same party where we'd first connected in my previous life, I felt nothing. He approached me with the same opening line, the same charming smile, and I saw through it instantly. I saw the way his eyes catalogued my appearance, calculating my worth based on surface appeal. I saw the eventual betrayal written in the casual way he touched my arm, like I was already his. "I don't think so," I said when he asked for my number. He looked surprised. "What?" "I'm not interested." I said it kindly but firmly, then walked away before he could respond. I felt lighter after that, one potential disaster avoided through simple honesty. The real test came 6 months later at the same gallery opening where everything had begun to unravel in my previous life. My father had insisted the whole family attend, just like before, but this time I arrived on my own terms. I wore black, a fitted dress with clean lines and a leather jacket I'd bought with money from my part-time job. My belt, the one Emma had taken before, cinched at my waist where it belonged. My hair was styled sharp, my makeup precise. I looked like someone who knew exactly who she was. Emma was already there when I arrived, dressed beautifully as always, but I noticed the way her eyes tracked me when I entered. There was something like envy in her expression. Quickly masked but unmistakably present, my mother pulled me aside within minutes. "What are you wearing?" she hissed. "You look like you're trying to upstage your sister." "I'm wearing what I like," I said calmly. "Emma has her style, I have mine." "But people are looking at you. You're drawing attention away from her." I met my mother's eyes and saw the script she was trying to hand me, the familiar role of supporting character, the expectation that I would dim myself so Emma could shine. But I was done accepting parts in other people's stories. "Good," I said. I walked away from her and spent the evening talking to people who actually listened when I spoke, who asked about my opinions and interests instead of seeing me as Emma's less impressive sister. I networked with gallery owners and artists, exchanged contact information with people who saw potential in me, built connections that were mine alone. I saw that Daniel arrive halfway through the evening. He was with friends, scanning the room with that same calculating look I remembered. His eyes passed over me once, then snapped back, recognition and confusion crossing his face. "I am different," I said simply. "Listen, I was thinking about what happened at that party. Maybe I could get your number now, we could grab coffee?" I looked at him, this man who had broken me in another life, who had chosen my sister over me without hesitation, and felt only mild curiosity about who he would become without me in his orbit. "I'm still not interested," I said, "but I'm sure you'll find someone." I turned away before seeing his reaction, moving toward a group discussing an upcoming exhibition. As I walked, I caught Emma watching me from across the room. She was alone for once, standing by the bar with a drink in her hand, and there was something lost in her expression. She approached me near the end of the night when most guests had filtered out and only family remained. "You've been acting weird," she said without preamble, "ever since that thing with the belt. What's going on with you?" I considered my answer carefully. Part of me wanted to tell her everything, about the life I'd lived, the pain I'd endured, the death that had reset it all. But I knew she wouldn't understand. How could she, when she'd never had to fight for space in her own family? "I'm just taking care of myself," I said instead, learning what that means. "It feels like you're pulling away from us," Emma said, and for the first time, I heard genuine hurt in her voice. "From me?" "I'm not pulling away," I said gently. "I'm just not disappearing anymore. There's a difference." Emma stared at me, trying to understand, and I saw the moment she gave up. She shook her head and walked back to our parents, leaving me standing alone by the concrete pillar where I'd hidden in my previous life. But this time, I wasn't hiding. I was exactly where I chose to be. The months that followed brought their own challenges. My parents struggled with my boundaries, oscillating between guilt and resentment. Emma and I developed a careful distance, no longer close but no longer cruel. We existed in parallel, two sisters who loved each other but no longer needed each other to define themselves. I graduated high school with honours, accepted into a university 3 states away, far enough to build a life that was entirely my own. My parents were surprised. They'd assumed I would stay close, attend the local college where Emma had already been accepted. "But what about Emma?" my mother asked when I announced my decision. "She was looking forward to having you nearby." Emma will be fine, I said, and so will I. I saw Emma at my graduation party, standing apart from the small crowd of relatives and friends. She looked smaller, somehow, less certain than I'd ever seen her. I walked over, carrying 2 glasses of champagne I'd stolen from the adult table. "Here," I said, handing her one. She took it, surprised. "I thought you were mad at me." "I am not mad," I said truthfully. "I was hurt in another life, but not anymore." "That doesn't make sense," Emma said. "I know," I smiled. "Drink your champagne." We stood there together, not talking, just existing in the same space without competition or comparison. It wasn't the close relationship we'd had as children before dynamics and favoritism had warped us into roles we never chose. But it was honest. And that was enough. The real revelation came 3 years later during a holiday visit home. I'd built a good life at university, made genuine friends, pursued interests that fascinated me, dated people who saw me as a whole person rather than a supporting character. I was 20 years old and felt more myself than I ever had. Emma was still at the local college, still living at home, still the centre of our parents' attention. But when I saw her at Christmas dinner, I noticed something had shifted. She looked tired. The effortless confidence I remembered was strained now, like she was working harder to maintain it. We ended up in my old room late that night, both unable to sleep, drawn together by old habit. "Do you ever feel like you're performing?" Emma asked suddenly. "Like everyone's watching and you can't stop pretending to be perfect, even though you're exhausted?" I looked at her carefully. "Yes, I used to feel like that all the time." "How did you stop?" "I left," I said honestly. "I built a life where nobody expected me to be anything other than myself." Emma was quiet for a long moment. "I think I took things from you, not just clothes, attention, space. I never noticed because it was always just there, you know? You were always just giving." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry." The apology hung between us, simple and genuine. In my previous life, this conversation had never happened. Emma had never needed to confront what she'd taken because I'd kept giving, until there was nothing left. "Thank you," I said, "for seeing it." We talked through the night, honest in ways we'd never been before. I told her about feeling invisible, about watching her receive praise for borrowed things, about the slow erosion of believing I mattered. She told me about the pressure of being perfect, about how exhausting it was to maintain an image, about her fear that without the constant validation, she'd somehow disappear. We were both trapped, I realised, just in different ways. I saw Daniel one last time, completely by accident, at a coffee shop near my university during my senior year. He was there with a girl I didn't recognise, laughing at something on his phone. He looked older, but not wiser, still handsome in that surface way that had once impressed me. He glanced up and our eyes met. I saw the moment of recognition, followed by something like regret. He stood, excusing himself from his companion, and walked over to where I was sitting. "Olivia," he said, "it's been a long time." "It has. You look amazing. Really different. Confident." "Thank you." I didn't return the compliment. I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. "I heard you're doing well. Art history program, right? That's great." "It is." He shifted uncomfortably, hands in his pockets. "Listen, I've thought about you a lot, about how things ended between us, or didn't end, I guess, since we never really started." "We didn't," I agreed. "I always wondered what would have happened if I'd asked you out that second time. If you'd said yes." I smiled slightly. "You would have dated me until Emma showed interest. Then you would have left me for her. It would have hurt more, that's all." He flinched. "That's not fair. You don't know that." "I do, actually." I stood, gathering my bag. "I'm glad I said no, Daniel. you taught me something important without even trying." "What's that?" "That the wrong people will always be the wrong people, no matter when you meet them. And that saying no is sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself." I left him standing there, and I didn't look back. My final year of university brought unexpected closure. My parents came to visit for the first time, making the long drive to see my life away from home. I gave them a tour of campus, introduced them to my friends, showed them my work in the university gallery. My mother was quiet throughout most of it, observing more than commenting. My father seemed genuinely impressed, asking questions about my thesis and future plans. Over dinner that night, my mother finally spoke. "I didn't realize how well you were doing," she said carefully. "You seem very happy here." "I am," I said. "I think—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "I think I didn't see you clearly before. I was so focused on Emma, on making sure she succeeded, that I didn't notice you were struggling. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was acknowledgement. And that mattered." "Emma was easier to love," I said gently. "She was bright and obvious and demanding. I was quiet and self-sufficient. I understand why you focused on her." "That's not an excuse," my father said, speaking for the first time. "You deserved our attention too. Both of you did." "You're right," I said. "I did deserve it. But I'm okay now. I figured out how to give it to myself." The conversation didn't fix everything. Years of neglect couldn't be erased by one honest dinner. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, beginnings are enough. I graduated summa cum laude, accepted into a prestigious graduate program across the country. Emma came to the ceremony, drove 7 hours with our parents to be there. When I walked across the stage to accept my diploma, I saw her in the crowd, standing and applauding with genuine pride. After the ceremony, she found me in the chaos of celebrating students and families. "I brought you something," she said, holding out a small wrapped box. Inside was my belt, the same one from so many years ago, now carefully preserved and cleaned. "I kept it all this time," Emma said quietly. "I never wore it after that first night you told me no. I wanted to give it back, but I didn't know how. It felt like returning it meant admitting something I wasn't ready to face." I held the belt, feeling the worn leather, the familiar weight of it in my hands. "What changed?" I asked. "You did," Emma said. "You showed me it was possible to be yourself without apologizing for it. I'm still learning, but I'm trying." I hugged her then, the first real embrace we'd shared in years. She held on tightly, and I felt something like forgiveness pass between us. Not for what had happened, but for who we'd both been when we didn't know any better. "Keep it," I said, pressing the belt back into her hands. "I don't need it anymore." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. It's just a belt, Emma, and I've built a whole new wardrobe anyway." We both laughed, and it felt easy in a way nothing between us had felt in years. I left for graduate school 2 weeks later, packing only what mattered, leaving behind the remnants of my old life. My room at home remained mostly empty, a ghost space that no longer defined me. I didn't need it. I didn't need the belt or the memories or the old patterns that had nearly destroyed me. I had myself, finally, completely, undeniably myself. The woman I'd become was unrecognizable from the girl who died on that dark road. That Olivia had been shaped by other people's needs, moulded into spaces that were never meant for her, erased by increments until nothing remained. This Olivia chose her own shape, created her own space, existed loudly and unapologetically. Years later, I would think about that belt occasionally, wonder if Emma still had it, if she wore it sometimes or kept it tucked away as a reminder. But mostly, I thought about the moment I'd said no for the first time. The small, quiet revolution that had changed everything. I was standing in my apartment now, in a city I'd chosen, surrounded by art I'd collected and books I'd read and clothes that fit the person I'd become. My closet was full of pieces I loved, each one selected because it made me feel powerful or beautiful or simply myself. There were no empty hooks, no missing pieces, nothing borrowed or stolen or given away out of obligation. Everything here was mine, and when I looked in the mirror each morning, I saw someone I recognised, someone I'd fought to become, someone who had died and been reborn not into a second chance, but into a first real life. The belt was just a belt, but the boundary it had represented became everything. I thought about reaching out to Daniel sometimes, curious about where he'd ended up. But then I remembered that his story wasn't mine to wonder about anymore. He was a chapter I'd closed before it could be written. Emma and I talked monthly now, real conversations where we both showed up as ourselves. She'd moved out of our parents' house, started building her own life, finding her own style that didn't require borrowing from others. We were learning to be sisters without the weight of comparison crushing us. My parents had softened too, slowly learning to see me as separate from their expectations. It wasn't perfect. Some habits were too ingrained to fully break. But there was effort now, and acknowledgement, and that created space for something genuine to grow. On quiet evenings, I sometimes thought about my first life, the pain of it, the slow suffocation, the dark road where it had ended. And I felt grateful, not for the suffering, but for the clarity it had given me, for the chance to recognise patterns before they destroyed me, for the knowledge that I was worth protecting. I'd learned that love without boundaries is just another form of self-destruction, that giving everything away leaves nothing for yourself, that the people who truly care for you will respect the space you claim. I'd learned that style isn't about clothes or accessories or borrowed pieces that transform you into someone else's vision. Style is about knowing who you are and wearing it unapologetically. I'd learned that rebirth doesn't require death. Sometimes it just requires saying no. The sunset painted my apartment in shades of gold and amber. I stood at the window, looking out at a city full of people living their own stories, making their own choices, claiming their own space in a crowded world. I was one of them now, not a ghost, not a supporting character, not a girl waiting for permission to exist. Just Olivia, whole and present and undeniably here. And that was enough. That was everything. I smiled, turned away from the window and went back to living my life, the one I'd chosen, the one I'd fought for, the one that was finally, completely mine.